John Wick is one of those movies that unexpectedly took everyone by surprise and was a huge hit with both audiences and critics. So much so that a sequel was actually made, but seeing as it has Keanu Reeves in it, is the sequel better or worse than the original? Well, in this versus video we are gonna find out. Let's get to it. In this movie's fictional world, John Wick is the best assassin, and soon after he retires, his wife dies, and her last parting gift to him is a dog. And it just so happens that one day John crosses paths with some thugs who want his car, but as you would expect, he says no. So they track him down, beat the living shit out of him, trash his place, take his keys, steal his car, and kill his dog. And hence we have our revenge story as John Wick seeks vengeance on the guys for stealing his car and, more importantly, killing his dog. Now on paper, this story would sound like the dumbest thing ever, but when you actually see the film play out, you actually end up rooting for John Wick to kill this punk for mercilessly killing his dog. Main reason being is because this dog was very much like a little kid. The way it would follow him around, the way he would take care of it, and even the way it would wake him up in the morning wanting to be fed. These are all characteristics of a child, so when it dies, you really feel for it and for John Wick. So the movie does an excellent job at conveying and getting you invested into a revenge story that ultimately should fail on every level. And those are the two key words here: revenge story. This is John Wick's motivation to come back and reprise his life as a badass assassin. So if the first John Wick is a revenge story, what is John Wick 2? Well, the story is that after having finished some unexpected business in the last movie, he now wants to get back to living a normal life, but unfortunately he owes a debt to someone who threatens to come after him if he doesn't repay it. So John Wick begrudgingly accepts the mission, hoping once it is complete he can go back to living a normal, peaceful life again. However, after he completes it, the guy who hired him tries to kill him, and when that doesn't work, he puts out a $7 million contract for John Wick's murder. Hence, Wick is now fighting for his life and is seeking revenge on this shit for putting him through all this crap. So yes, John Wick 2 in essence is another revenge story, but I would argue it's a little deeper than that, and additionally there is a key difference between these two revenge stories, and that difference, funnily enough in a Keanu Reeves movie, is choice. In the first movie, he didn't have to go and get revenge for his dog, but he chose to. In the second movie, he has no choice. He must do this mission, and if he doesn't, he'll be in deep shit. Incidentally though, after completing the mission, it gets him in even deeper shit. Not to mention that fully trained assassins are coming after him in this movie as opposed to mob thugs. So the stakes feel much higher in this movie, and it all culminates to one hell of an ending, which I will talk about later. So in regards to which story is better, it is without a shadow of a doubt John Wick 2. The action in John Wick 1 is awesome. It's fast-paced, full of energy, and is wonderfully choreographed. And that is one of the reasons it's so fun, is because Keanu Reeves, despite being in his 50s, is still performing his own stunts, and as a direct result, we have long and clear shots of him killing a bunch of bad guys without the need for the movie to constantly cut away behind his back and replace him with a stunt double. And because of this, the director makes sure that you can clearly see his face during all the action. On top of that, this movie has its own unique style that differentiates it from other action movies in the genre. Really, the action is so cool and stylized that I can't help but smile whenever I see John Wick taking care of business. If I had one complaint with the action, it's that some of the hand-to-hand fight scenes were just okay. The gun scenes and car chases are so enjoyable, but fighting scenes like this, although enjoyable, lack the same level of style that made the gunfight so refreshing and memorable. But other than that, the action in this movie is solid. So how does John Wick 2's action compare to the first one? Well, first off, the action is more grand as the locations are more open world, whereas in the first movie they felt more closed and confined. It takes place in beautiful looking locations with jaw-dropping cinematography. It's more fast-paced, and all the while it's even more brutal, but at the same time it does not overshadow the action in the first film. It also does something which is very rare in action movies. John Wick's gun doesn't have unlimited ammo. This movie takes advantage of the fact that guns have bullets, and it forces John Wick to improvise and use either another gun or hand-to-hand combat whilst he is simultaneously reloading his primary gun. It really separated the action apart from every other movie and is one of the many reasons this action felt so original. The body count is much bigger too. In the first movie he kills 84 people, and in this, I lost count, but it felt like it was much more than the first one. And these are trained assassins as opposed to lower ranked mob thugs, although he does kill a few of them too. Not to mention that the amount of assassins in this world was actually quite creepy, and whenever you hear their phones go off and being notified that they can kill John Wick, it's almost like a horror movie. The action in this is far more brutal than John Wick 1. They actually show you in great detail how he kills people with a pencil, and I couldn't control myself. I sat in the theater and yelled, "Whoa!" The last time I had a similar yet smaller reaction was when I watched The Raid 2. On top of all that, the color scheme was beautiful. In practically every single shot, something creative was going on, whether with the action or the cinematography or both. The mirror hall in particular was so amazing, and I can't even fathom how much time it must have taken them to put that scene together. So the action in the second movie is superior to the first. It was taken to the next level in every possible way, and I have got to commend the stunt team, the director, and Keanu Reeves for topping themselves this time round. Now, the acting from all the characters in both movies are fine. William Dafoe is good as the friendly assassin who knows John Wick, and even the son of the mob boss is great as the little weasel that you just want to punch every time you look at him. One of the many things the first John Wick does incredibly well is introducing all these side characters, and I really do mean introduce, as you hardly see them in the movie, yet they are still very memorable. I remember the assassin hotel receptionist, and I especially remember John Leguizamo. His morals that were on display and his heavily implied acquaintancehood interaction with John Wick really made him a likable character. Or maybe I just like him so much because he punched this git in the face. And I flat out love the reaction Vigo has when he finds out his son messed with John Wick.
Yeah, well, because he stole John Wick's car, sir, and killed his dog.
Oh.
The look of fear on his face is priceless. I love it. And again, watching Weaselface get beat up by his dad was nice. As well as setting up characters, it also built up locations, the most popular one being the Hotel for Assassins, and it really makes you wonder, what other locations are there for only assassins? Their own bathrooms, perhaps? The only performance you question is Keanu Reeves. When he's talking to William Dafoe during the funeral, there was something dull about his performance. Now I know what you're thinking, no shit Sherlock, he's at his wife's funeral, of course he's going to be acting this way. No, what I mean is that his line delivery is stiff. Stiff in a way that only Keanu can pull off.
How you holding up? I keep asking why her.
But after that, his acting is perfectly fine. In fact, practically the very next scene is an emotional one where he cries after reading a letter from his wife, and it was very convincing. So John Wick 1 is clearly setting the groundwork for world building should a sequel come along, and they comfortably advance it in Chapter 2. We get to see old characters return, and we also get some new ones. In regards to returning characters, we get to see a lot more from Winston, and it was nice to see him look out for John Wick, and he clearly favors him over other assassins. John Leguizamo also returns for a little bit, and this time you can clearly see that him and John Wick are friends. I hope we get to see more of him in the third movie, because aside from being a badass mechanic, I feel like there is a lot more to his character. As for new characters, we get quite a few, but the only two you really need to know about are the ones played by Common and Lawrence Fishburne. Now Common plays an assassin, and something I really like about him is that he and John both respect and follow the rules to a T, especially in the scene where you see them on continental grounds. They choose to stop fighting and they both have a drink and talk. The reason this is great is because it humanizes one of the assassins that we originally perceived as the bad guy, and seeing them very calmly talk right after they were trying to kill each other was really interesting, and it's not something I have seen before. Now before you say anything, I know Kill Bill Vol 1 did this already, but they stopped fighting over a little girl entering the scene, and to be honest, that was kind of cheap. Getting two lethal assassins to stop fighting over something other than a child and having a chat was very clever. And Lawrence Fishburne, he only has a couple of short scenes and he was only really here to help out John Wick. He does his job well, but I think he really painfully overacted in this scene.
Somebody please get this man a gun.
Intriguingly, he says this line completely normal in the trailer, so I'm surprised that they ended up using the really over-the-top take in the end. Overall though, the story gives him something to do, and then you find out that he is going to play a big part in the sequel, which I will talk about later. So yeah, the casting for the characters in John Wick 1 and 2 are all round really strong. They fit their roles very well, and you don't question their performances. Most of the time. So this round is a tie. As good as the first John Wick is, there are a couple of things where you think, what the hell was that about? There were two scenes that really bothered me. The first one is where he runs out of bullets shooting the goons in the dance club, so he resorts to fighting this guy hand to hand. And loses, only for him to then pull a gun out of the back of his belt. And that is just stupid. He could have easily pulled it out earlier to kill this guy instead of fighting and getting himself injured and losing Weaselface here. If the director wanted a hand-to-hand fight, then that's fine. They just shouldn't have made him pull a gun out at the end of the scene, as that opened up a plot hole. And the second part that bothered me is practically a cliche in many other action movies. The bad guy catches the good guy, and instead of shooting him when he's knocked out, they tie his hands together, wait for him to regain consciousness, and then leave the room and have their men suffocate him to death instead of shooting him in the head. I mean, how stupid are these guys? They caught the guy they say is superior to the frickin' boogeyman, and they don't even kill him when they have the chance. This kind of took away from his stellar reputation that the movie perfectly built up for him. Also, the ending to this movie was so quick and abrupt that everyone I have shown this to, myself included, all say the same two things. Oh, it's over. Is that it? And that's exactly how I feel. I'm not saying the film was lacking anything, but anytime I see the ending I always feel underwhelmed. But those are my only 3 complaints. Now it's John Wick 2's turn, and in all honesty, there were no bad things. I mean, if you want me to be super nitpicky, then you could argue why the bad guys didn't pull their guns out in the opening fight scene instead of going all hand to hand. Also, this shot here, I really wish was not in the trailer, because when I was watching the movie, I saw it coming, and instead of being jaw-dropped, I was just like, okay. But that isn't any fault of the movie, it's just a common problem with trailers nowadays. And do you remember the underwhelming ending scene in the first movie? Well, the second movie makes up for it, and then some. Not only does it end on a high note, not only did it end in the most perfect place possible, not only does it leave you on a cliffhanger, but you find out that while serving the purpose of this story, it was also simultaneously setting stuff up for a sequel without us even realizing. And I gotta give it so much props for that, because movies nowadays throw it in your face that they're trying to set up the sequel before they've even finished the movie. But this movie did it in a much more smart way than them. And I really can't wait to see what happens next. Seriously, I can't remember the last time a sequel had such a great cliffhanger since The Empire Strikes Back. That's how excited I am. And before I give my scores, let's talk about a new segment that really frustrates the living crap out of me. Whenever John Wick comes to the UK, no matter how badass his movies are, some shit always comes along with them. For whatever reason, John Wick really hates the UK. For example, John Wick 1 came out in the US on the 24th of October, right? And I really wanted to see it, but the UK was not scheduled to get it until February, so I had to wait 4 months to get a chance to see it. And then finally, when it was almost time for it to get released, I have a look at my local cinema for bookings, and then the movie's release date was changed from February to April the 10th. So it took a total of 6 months after it was released in the US to come to the UK. And because they took the piss to release it, I didn't bother supporting it in the cinema knowing that it was already out on DVD and Blu-ray in many other countries. And on its way to the UK, John Wick 2 had 29 seconds cut to get a 15 rating, which in the US that would mean instead of getting a hard R, we just get an R. So which scene got cut? Well, the BBFC who rate movies in the UK described it as a suicide scene. Now 29 seconds being cut out of a violent scene is a lot. Imagine if one of the gory scenes in Saw had 29 seconds cut out of it. Or Die Hard, Rambo, Terminator. That is a lot of time to take away from a violent scene, and when I was watching the movie, it got me angry. So not only did we in the UK get an inferior version of the movie, but we also got it 1 week after the US. So to put it simply, we get the movie late and we get it cut. Why do studios do this? I mean, okay, it's obvious they want more people to watch it in theaters as it means more money, but why can't they release 2 versions of the movie? One that is 15 so the younger teenagers can go in to see it, and then an 18 version for the rest of the adults who are of age. That would be a far better system and one I would have no problems with. But cutting it down to 1 version and then leaving us lumbered with the one that is clearly inferior is not good. Before I decided to make this video, I said I was not going to see this movie in the cinema. I was going to wait for it to come to Blu-ray because this is a deal breaker to me and I don't want to support movies that do this. I said it before and I will say it again. If you're going to make cuts to a movie, then you better make cuts to my ticket price. If you continue to do this, then I'm not going to support your movies in theaters, and quite frankly, when I talk to other people about the movies, I will encourage them not to see it either. So having said that, it's time to give the scores. When I first saw John Wick, I was not too crazy about it. I thought it was good, but that's it. And after watching it the second time, I enjoyed it more, but ultimately my score has remained the same at a very strong 7 out of 10. It was almost an 8, but it didn't quite reach it for me. Now, when I went to see John Wick 2, I went in with the intention of reducing its score by 1 point because of the scene they cut in the UK. But surprisingly, something unbelievable happened. I actually enjoyed this movie so much that I had to restore the point back, and as a direct result, John Wick Chapter 2 gets a 10 out of 10, making this not only one of the best action movies ever made, but it also marks one of my best cinema experiences I ever had. I really enjoyed the first John Wick, but I was not a fan of it like many other people. This, however, has won me over. I am now a big fan, and not only that, but John Wick has replaced Die Hard as my favourite action franchise. That's how good John Wick 2 is. It actually complements the first movie and in its own way makes it better, because it's now part of a much bigger story. And that's one of the best things a sequel can do. It's my favourite movie of the year, and I doubt anything else will be able to take its place. So that's it for this versus video, guys. You will definitely want to stay tuned for the next one, as I will be comparing the Wolverine to the new Logan movie that just hit theatres. And here's my question to you guys. For the first time in my versus videos, do you want me to do a versus battle of Logan and the Old Man Logan comic? If so, drop a comment and click that like button and share this video, and I will get to work on it as soon as I can. Thanks again so much for watching, guys, and I will catch all of you next time. Take care.